Alright, so Ceachaúilsibh or Ceachaúilsibh as it is in Connemara or Mbeirimis as it is in Donegal or Consalgad or Consalmshibh as it is down south. I tried to make a couple of videos earlier on and I deleted them because they weren't of very good quality, and I just wanted to do, they were a bit rambling, and I've kind of organised my thoughts a little bit better. I'm just after coming back from Ceadfaig or Carataig, which is Beannachtaí where I learned my Irish. I was playing tunes there this evening, playing trad music, and it's quite late in the morning, so I'm going to come in as close as I can to the microphone so that I can be as audible as possible. I've noticed that I've been getting a few more subscribers, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from, and I've just realised I saw a video by Patchy where he name drops me, which I'm very grateful for the high praise. He mentions on Longshach as well, who I think is on Longshach is probably near about the best person I've seen talking about Irish on our linguistics in general. I put him there with Simon Roper, who's a fantastic linguist on Old English. Yeah, I'm very grateful to Beannachtaí, as they'd say in Termikiddy, and it's kind of just sprung me to sort of make another video, because I kind of feel like we're kind of all sort of doing the same sort of thing, and I want to just kind of do a basic introduction for people maybe that are getting a bit confused between all the different dialects and how they kind of relate to each other. So I'm going to do basically what I did with my TY students this year, and I taught them Nollag dialectology. Basically, I went and took individual phrases from each dialect and kind of went through all of the variances in phonetics and pronunciation. So I'm going to start, as I did with them, with Gaeling the Moon. So the first thing you notice about Munster, a lot of you will know watching this video already, I presume, is that they don't want to call it Gaeilge down south. It's Gaeling, sometimes spelled G-A-O-L-U-I-N-N, or sometimes spelled G-A-E-L-A-I-N-N. I think the first spelling is more popular in Ring in County Waterford. And I always kind of consider variations in Irish dialects and in dialects in general as kind of like a dimmer switch, where you sort of everything is pronounced down south and almost nothing is pronounced up north. So if you take words like A-G-H-A-I-D-H, the word for face, maybe in the north, in Donegal say aye, and in Connemara to be aye. In the south, in Munster, it's going to be aig. So those IDHs and IGHs at the end of the words are given a g sound. Similarly, all BHs and MHs are given a v sound, bilabial fricative, as Longshach would have been described before. It's not a v like the dental labial fricative like we have in English, like the letter B. It's more a v sound, like a BH. V. There's an exception to that where BH occurs in the middle of a word after the letter I, and it gets an E sound, so like Cuisach, C-U-I-B-H-S-E-A-C-H would be a good example of that, or Carcaguina is probably the best example of it, because that's the peninsula where the language is strongest in Munster. I'm just going to go through a speed run, a couple of words or phrases or things which are very particular to Munster. So things like, for instance, they won't say, they tend to put shevu on tha after a, so comes hagut, comes hantu, very similar to Scots Gaelic. And actually, you see a lot of people compare Scots Gaelic to Donegal Irish, which is very fair. That's similarities, but Scots Gaelic is kind of nearly like a mixture between Ring Irish and Donegal Irish in some ways when I hear it. Words like Neomot, which means minute. Cíam instead of fecim, so that's an ginto sin, ní chéim faic. Neadar is probably the one that people always go to. It's a very obvious one. There's a good video by Bite Size Irish where they talk about all these different intricate parts of the dialect in West Kerry. The emphasis is almost always on the second syllable in words as well. So the example I always use is the word for moonshine in Irish is poteen, as we would say it in the north. They'd say poteen down south. You will find that they have a kind of a tendency to pronounce OIs as an I sound. So Rhine is probably the most obvious example. That in Connemara that would be Reen, and in North Mayo and Donegal would be Ryn, R-Y-N-N. A few other ones, you'll find that a lot of the vocabulary that's in Munster is found in Standard Irish, and there's historically reasons for that, because a lot of the standardised Irish was based on Munster Irish because of Antahish or léir, people like that. There is variance as well. There are like specific peculiarities, and you'll often find that whatever one is a peculiarity to Munster, then the standard version will be from Connemara. So like the example of Nyomat that I gave instead of Nomad, and Nomad would be used in Connemara. But again, all the question words that we teach standardized, like Cunus, which is originally K-unus, Cunus. I think they pronounce it Cunus in Ring, but I'm open to correction there. Cod, Cahan, all the question words are kind of based on Munster Irish. And then some of the grammar, well, a good proportion of the grammar is based on Munster Irish. So like Viamar is a really, when I hear that, I really think of Munster. Now there are other forms, those synthetic forms that didn't make the cut, shall we say. Sorry, this chair is squeaking a bit. So we'd always know of Viamar, but there's also Viavar, which is V-shiv or U-war plural, and Viatar. And then in the first and second person singular indicative, you would have devius instead of vima, you'd say devius, and devish instead of vitu. And you'll notice I'm putting a du in at the start there. That du is present in the Kaidan and it's present in the other dialects, but it normally only shows its head or rears its head in front of a vowel. So jejima, for instance, jejima or dolma and all those ones, that's actually du olma. And it's, I don't know if you could describe it as a past participle, but it was something very common in Middle English, and Munster Irish retained it, so that's very common. So if I give you a sample sentence in Munster Irish, you might say something like, for instance, I was here yesterday, but you weren't, and I see that you're here today. And I wonder how long you'll stay. So, devies an sa anye, ach ní ravish, ach tanto an sa anyov, gus came go vidar own. You're here today, and I see that you are go vidar. There's other synthetic endings you have, like for instance, IR at the end of verbs, or in the present tense to indicate second person singular, and ID to indicate third person plural. So like they were there. So Todd and some Allahad. You know, I'm not saying an shin or an sha. It's on son and so. I think that changes after or before sun and so. Are obviously the shot and the shins of that, but I think they change depending on whether there's a word with a preceding word with a slender or at the end of it. But I'm open to correction on that. There's a guy called Sean McAtunny who has a whole bit on that, and I think it is like, I don't know, is it the poet he's talking to? I heard whose name escapes scarce you in the moment. I do apologise. Other things which I would think of as peculiarly Munster Irish, like a lot of the pronunciation that's taught in standardised Irish, and there's no, it's not like we have an RP for Irish. You don't, which is why it's kind of so erratic. You know, you hear in pronunciations from Beannachtaí, from Dublin, like sometimes they'll say ishtig and then sometimes they'll say ishtig. There's not an RP in Irish. They try, you know, the Caidan was an attempt to make a written standard, not a spoken standard. And really what they wanted to do was make Munster Irish the national standard. Now there was some debate about that because Professor O'Malley, who was the first professor of Irish, who was from between Montastney and Codmona, wanted it to be Mayo Irish, or I remember someone telling me, or either reading it somewhere, that he wanted Roscommon Irish, at that East Connacht dialect. In his opinion, was the best thing to base a standard on. But I mean, it doesn't matter where you go to in the country, because if you go to Donegal, they'll say that everything should be Donegal Irish, and that's the best Irish that was ever spoken, and same thing that, you know, this. So, anyway, there is a division between West Munster, Desmond, kind of Jasmine, which is South Munster, kind of Cork and Kerry, and Daoise Irish, or the Irish ring. So that the example I always used to describe that accent has been unbelievable, but I don't think it's quite that contemporary. I'm old now, I have to just accept it. But if you ever listen to the two Johnnies, for instance, they'll be going, "How are you doing? You're well now, that's great now. If you ever hear a Waterford accent and you're talking like that, I really like that now. Have you got any blaze?" And you can hear the vowel sounds, they're in yeah. It's very back of the mouse kind of thing. I'm struggling to think of the IPA descriptions. I'm not drinking an IPA, but I'm drinking an ale. You hear those in Ring Irish. So all words with with the letter I in the middle of them. So I would say something like sim, which in Connemara we pronounce seam, and I think it's something similar in West Kerry, seam or something like that. And becomes Sime. So a very common joke that people say is "Ha am heim gedaine guns in the Reine." So I'm trying to think of other peculiarities to Ring Irish. I know their word for timpish is kittering, and that ing sound as well. I'm just sort of watching a video by Dave Learns Irish where he breaks down a piece of Irish from Cooley, and they do that ing, so inn, like a going, you know, brother bit a going and so. There are some elements of Munster Irish which you would think, which are quite peculiar, in terms of like how much they vary from the other dialects and from the Caidan. So like one that runs with me, which is actually direct translation from Ruddy Kinshal Samsa, is na full. So they won't say nach and they won't put an er on it, they'll say na and efata and will full. They'll keep it as the unlipsed version of it. Na big ton some. I'm after thinking of another thing in future tense. They will, for first person future tense indicative, they'll put a D on the end of it. So like some I'll do that later on. And there's an excellent linguist called Dr. Andre Palandri, who is excellent at breaking down all of these things. Anytime I talk to him, I learn something new, I'll be honest, and he's a fantastic musician as well. I'm just jealous when he gets to be Italian as well. It's not fair, but I remember him breaking down some of like the linguistic origins to some of that. There's some theories as well as to why the emphasis is in the second syllable in Munster Irish and it's not so much in the other We know that the first syllable pronunciation is older, for some reason which I can't remember, but I know there's a video, the same video with that guy Sean McTunley, he mentions it, and it's a theory by RnaG, that it was an influence from French, because obviously if you listen to French you'll hear people say garçon, and obviously in Munster it's garçon. I'm going to move, I'm trying to think if there's anything, a couple of other dialectical words, the quick ones. They'll say galúnach down south, they'll say ambasht. Galúnach means soap, they'll say ambasht, which means my God, or I'm trying to go very quickly through this. Yeah, just a couple of other things. And dawa instead of jeffid, esámach instead of jagor, instead of a teenager, so esámach. Panu Hoagland has an excellent kind of breakdown of all these little vocabulary. I'll try and put a list in this in the description of this video, but or maybe I'll just put a link into his thing, because it's very, very good. But yeah, that would be now obviously that's not a comprehensive description of everything in Munster Irish, but that would be like the main way you'd recognise it is like they're going to put the emphasis on the second syllable, they're going to pronounce g, there's going to be loads of g and stig and Hamid and so, Vachara here, aríst and so, Gadain Helnig, Consagot, Gadain, Ambasht, Hanton no Tata. Something else they say in West Kerry is they'll say Kada instead of Pel. There's another great video by Beannachtaí called Conscience Shroide, where 2 books from Munster describing all these little kind of individual linguistic elements, and it's funny, which always helps. I'm going to go to the other end of the country now. I'm going to go to Donegal, and as I said, in Munster Irish it's kind of similar to German. You're pronouncing absolutely everything, and it's almost the exact opposite. In Donegal you pronounce almost nothing. So for instance, if we take that sentence that I said, Dvisan sa nye ravish fénig ansa haman sa nyav agus fek him govilar on. I was here yesterday, but you weren't here, but I'm here today, and I see that you're here. So we'll say that, translate that, just that exact same sentence to Donegal Irish. He man sho in ye, haro tasan sho, taman sho in you, is team good tasan sho, faster, as well. So I was here, he man sho in ye, most people would be familiar with that. Haro, so CHA is kind of a negative participle. That is very common in, it's not always used, but it's very common in Guidor Irish and Maharorty, as far as I'm aware, and Fachanina Gartaharta. I think there's a division around the first. There is a guy who's much better at explaining these things than I am, Kieran Dunbarach, and he's described an isoglass. Well, I'm not making false credit to him, but he would be the place where I would have seen it first described as an isoglass kind of going down, that covered Tyrone, down through Monaghan, Omagh, County Louth, and then extending up into Scotland. And it's very much characteristic of Scots Gaelic. It comes originally from Middle Irish or Old Irish, Ní Chan, and then it became Chan, and then it became Ha. But that, you know, as soon as I hear Ha, Harutancha Scaribi, Harutkamoi, Tinta da, Tinta Donna, Tinta Bami, Missa Mahia. Coming back to a little bit of phonetics, because Pat used a little bit of this in his videos, and I've done a bit of this on the Orqueel, because it's one that really bugs me. So down south in Kerry, it's kind of an alveolar tap mixed with that kind of zh kind of sound like we have in North Mayo. Vish a gobert, chansa, a gobert, It's not as pronounced as it is in Cartaig, Ubush. In the rest of Connacht, apart from Cartaig, it's kind of an alveolar tap, Ubud, which I'll go Ubud, and show with it. Tasha Ubud, and show with it. Ni te, don't take it, what's it? Tasha Ubud, ni shall Ubud, which shall Ubud. And it's the same pronunciation up as far as Blacksod. I've never heard anyone in Blacksod or Auckland say Ubush. There are two orcleals in Dulclichan, and one is that kind of j sound, which I think to some extent exists in Ranafast. I've definitely heard speakers from Ranafast doing that eight pronunciation, but the more common one that we associate with Donegal is an A sound. So, for instance, I wouldn't, if I was from Donegal, I wouldn't say I'm working. I'd say Tamagabui. I wouldn't say Tamagabush. I'd say Tamagabui. And that leads on to something else that you notice, that the fad sound is much more broad as te. Causes quite a lot of confusion for people, like students, like secondary school students. I'm a teacher in a secondary school, and they really struggle with the Donegal Clustishkich, and that's a huge part of it, in my opinion, is because the vowel sounds are so different, and even more so than the fact that the consonants aren't as pronounced. I think it's more the vowel sounds more so than anything else. So like down south, you know, it's very, you know, if you think about the English that they speak to them, they are like, oh, yeah, it's great, no, Jackie here, or yeah, Michael here, or yes, you know, and you think a bit the way people are like, I'll take it very sharp, like, you know, like that, right, yeah. So it's a say, you know, these things, they're not a one-for-one map onto the Irish language, but they're certainly built on a bedrock of the Irish language. That's changing a lot now because of American influence on TikTok, and you know, Ireland becoming a more multicultural society, which is something I would love to do some research on myself in terms of, you know, how dialects of English are changing in Ireland, but that's maybe for another time. But yeah, that is the vowel sounds are certainly something you notice in Donegal Irish. Just to give you a couple of ideas of some of the words, so I mentioned team instead of keem, T-C-H, I put the M in Munster is keem, and then obviously the standard and the Connacht version is fechem, to see. You will find that the CH is very, very soft if it's pronounced at all, so like ishte, that is a feature of Achill Ireland Irish as well. And there's a start reasons for that. It's because obviously the plantations of Ulster and Taylor to Connacht, huge amount of people came as refugees from Ulster and ended up settling in West Mayo and in North Mayo, and there's a large amount of evidence for that. Now, that's not to say that Mayo Irish is a mixture of Connemara Irish and Donegal Irish. I don't think that's an accurate representation of it. I think it's a kind of lazy description of it, but there is certainly a Donegal or Ulster influence there in North Connacht, and you can see that even in the surnames like Gillespie and Doherty. But yeah, that CH sound being ishta and ma. A couple of other ones that kind of come to my mind are things like we'll just do a couple of maybe terms that are different. So I already mentioned Nyomat, and the standard is nomad. In Donegal it's Bumutje, and Mayo North is kind of a halfway house, Momot or Momot. They will, I remember reading somewhere the tendency amongst Donegal speakers to use the present tense to express the future tense. Tig tomorrow, will you come tomorrow? But it's phrased, tig is their version of tagan or tag. In North Mayo it's chicken, T-I-G-E-A-N-N. So you can obviously see a relationship. In Termacity it's tagan, South Mayo it's tagan, chicken, North Mayo and Achill, tagan, South Mayo, and in Connemara as well, and obviously Munster. So tig tomorrow, that version, that tig is or that version of the verb tar lends itself to another way to express to be able to do something faded. So it's more common to hear in Donegal Irish and in North Mayo Irish. You can do that. Had you got you can't do that. Had you you couldn't do that. So I mentioned already as well in Munster Irish that they'll have a tendency to add on these kind of little suffixes onto the words, kind of adlucinative, I think is the correct linguistic term. I should have Googled it, but where they'll combine it's kind of a synthetic form, again, similar to Viether and Viamer. That is almost totally done away with in Donegal Irish, save the conditional forms and the past habitual forms as far as I'm aware. But in Donegal, they'll tend to say, instead of using past habitual, they'll say begradu galistana and nationchart. It used to be, it was usual for me to do something. But begradu britanjatiane, begradu ashanahe, I used to eat that, but it was usual to me to do that. But this is jirin and jira from what I can hear. Another thing I've just unconsciously mentioned there is do, D-O-M-H. That's not entirely unique to Donegal. We have it in an emphatic version in North Mayo. I've asked Dr. Andrea Palandri, I keep calling Dr. Andrea, it's just Andrea anytime I talk to him, but I want to give him his honorific. And he said, like, he asked me, like, when I say it, but I said just Tordu Ashin, and I was like, no, Tordun Ashin, or Turum Ashin. But it is emphatic in North Mayo, and it is used in Beannachtaí as well, because I remember talking to a speaker from there, and Dusa, he said Dusa a couple of times. So, as far as I'm aware, I'm trying to remember what Andrea told me, I'll have to look it up later, but I think it might be the older form, the D-O-M-H, or else that it arose and then the rest of the country moved on or something, I can't remember. But anyway, do instead of dum, gugasta instead of gutapui, as it would be down south, or gumar, sometimes down in Munster. Gumar is common of RnaG as well, of léir and then Low Irish, but gumar, M-E-A-R. I can think off the top of my head about 7 different ways to say quickly or fast in Irish. Gustipui, which is the most common one around Connemara, Gutuf, which is the most common one around Eris, Gahabil, which is common around Blacksod, Guscuffanti, which is common around Blacksod as well, Gubil, lively, Gugasta, which is the Donegal version, and there's another one that I'm even out that I can't think of off the top of my head. Gulu, I suppose you could say as well. That's the one I was trying to think of. Other ones, Scaftje instead of Scata, or Slua, they'll say Scaftje. If you Scaftje dinian show, you should think to jazz. Or if you léir more dinian show. Instead of saying Feach, which would be kind of more common down in Munster, they'll say Igawork. If you mag Gawork Arshan, or if you mag Gunk Arshan, which is same thing we have in North Mayo as well, and I know they use Jarku occasionally as well, because I've read it in short stories by Donegal Irish language writer. Can't say I've heard it too much. Shukrid means because of or owing to. Shukrid to show Falai. Fa instead of fui, and it's fe down south at Fada. A kavid means to kind of watch, like to survey something or surveying something. And then they have faire, F-A-I-R-E, and that's another peculiar idiomatic thing of Donegal. I'm not saying peculiar because it's weird, but I just like it's specific to it. They don't say for a toru would be the funeral. T-O-R-R-A-M-H, Teofada or R-A-M-H, and then faye, F-A-I-R-E, or faja, as I said, is the wake, whereas in the other parts of Ireland, toru is a wake and suchrid is a funeral. So, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the ethno-linguistic reasons why there's such a distinction. I don't think Very interesting thing to look at. Maybe I should pursue a PhD at some stage when I have money and more time. I want to go and have a look at Connemara Irish now. Most of my channel is devoted to Mayo Irish because it's the thing that's North Connacht Irish and Mayo Irish are the things that I'm most interested in. So I'll do a little bit on Connemara Irish. Connemara Irish is kind of halfway in between those two dialects, and actually originally when they were designing out the dialect maps or describing the dialects, one of the things that they were kind of thinking was that just draw a line between through Galway, so they'd have a north dialect and a south dialect, and kind of Connacht would be either side of those, which obviously, because there's so many differences, it wouldn't have made much sense. You could possibly make an argument that you could tie in, Carthagen with Donegal, because like word endings like Creidval and Tigval instead of Creshunt and Tishkins, and the names of all the animals or something, but it'd be a much harder argument to make with like some place like Cardamona, for instance. So I'm trying to think, we'll take that sentence that I said, I was here yesterday but you weren't, but I'm here today and I see that you are. Ní man seo ní is ach ní ratasa, a tá man seo inniuh agus feice go tán. So down in Munster, ANN sounds are, apart from the long ones, like our clun, are an own sound. Own. In Donegal and in North Mayo, it's or am, and in South Connemara and Turmacady and Cardamona, Joyce Country, it's on. So it's almost like there's a father on the A. So it's like on a cup. What is it? Third person prepositional pronouns tend to have a B sound at the end of them. North of South Connemara, it's a F sound, so like Liofa, Dofa. And then south it's a H sound, so Lioha, for instance, or Uha. What does this mean? So instead of saying, if I was to say they have money, I would say Ta get that cup. If I was from South Connemara, I know Erisaniach is different. Ties in more with kind of the Joyce Country pronunciation, where it's Aku, and Liof. I'm not sure whether to say Liohop or Liofa in Erisaniach. I think it's Liohop, but I know to say Aku definitely, because I've heard plenty of them say it. But yeah, so like it wouldn't be, would I get, like, do they want money? Will I get the test up? You get the test up. Hug my I get hope. I gave them money. That BH as a B sound appears in other places. So like second person plural preposition pronouns like leap, gleep, rope. It changes a bit, so like for instance ugly, A-G-A-I-B-H, it gets an I-fada sound, so it's not consistent with the I before it, but this I suppose is kind of a rule that if it's two syllable polysyllabic, ugly, S-I, tá much point in sauce of S-I would say. There's loads more schwas in the second syllable in Connemara, emphasis on the first syllable as in most Connacht, but like there's loads more schwas in their words, so like Jumma instead of Gianov or Gianu or Janu instead of Donegal, Kiltu Jumma, and this it kind of explains sort of how the Kaizen had a much more restricted spelling, or much more simplified spelling, and how a lot of the grammatical features of the spellings were eroded. So like one that a bugbear of mine is T-I-N-E. I really just don't like it because it's not grammatically correct. And I know it's a really sad, pathetic, nerdy thing to be angry about, but Chinley, T-E-I-N-I-D-H or T-I-N-I-D-H in various ways, would be the animal, the noun, and Krishna Tinlu as it said in Joyce Country up to Donegal, would be the degenerative form of it. In Connemara, it's all just tilma, and because a lot of the spelling was based on that, it eroded that part of the grammatic, and it just really bothered me. I know it shouldn't bother me really, but Borgnamona would be another one where if there's north of South Connemara, it would be Borgnamonu. If you go to Corgnamonu, they won't say Corgnamona unless they're from South Connemara and they've moved in. It'll be Corgnamonu. Ooh, it should be. I sounds tend to have an I father sound to them. So what does that mean? So things like, it wouldn't be ginier, it'd be genier, and genier. Kilto to German, he genier was said, and you might was said, you might Ted. What else? They have a weird relationship with the Fudamhati. So they would say Vidar, Hodar, Stechom, said. But then they'll say Vechtu instead of Veha, which is common in the rest of Connacht. They'll say Vechtu, Vechma, but then at the same time they say Vejish. So I don't know, it's kind of a bit inconsistent in that way, but I mean, it's not, you're not looking for, it's constantly Mojaha, it'll change, so it's just natural. I'm trying to think something else very specific to Connemara. Words like ginjuri, meaning details. If you hear that, I know someone from South Connemara, ginjuri would have said, well, ginjuri ed. The G being removed from the preposition pronoun egg, so like ed, en. Do that a little bit in North Mayo, and it is a feature of Southwest Donegal Irish, Glenconnemkill, where it gets kind of like a Y sound. Nila sayam. Well, I say it. Well, I say it. Rudin chat for tradition. Faduda about that. Fafada DTAOBH. And anything else? Inishir. If I had to go back and I was to learn another dialect or start learning Irish again, I'd probably pick either Turmigedi Irish or Inishir Irish. I think they're just beautiful. And there's something very musical, the real musical quality to Inishir Irish. There is a far better video describing Inishir Irish by a guy called Beannachtaí, who's from the island and is a very well-known sean-nós singer and just very intelligent and entertaining kind of presenter. And I would encourage you to go watch that video. But a few of the things he mentions, like Yilma instead of Runyima, which I already described as, is a feature of Munster Irish, like the Yilmas Rodegant, that's it down in Munster, and they have that version in Inishir, because Inishir is that bit closer to County Clare. And just like there's a Harnash is very common, Own instead of Own, as it's Connemara and the other Iron Islands. But there's a good few of them there. Now, this is about nearly 40 minutes long of a video. It is much better than the original one I attempted to put up. This is not by any means an exhaustive description of the variances in dialects, and there's 100 million billion zillion things I've left out. But this is just to give kind of pointers. I'm going to try and put a word list in just with some dialect variations for people just to get an idea. But yeah, I would highly encourage you to look at people like Nollag for Munster Irish. There's a guy called Beannachtaí who has teach yourself Ulster Irish. He has a course that he's done, is very, very good. There are tons of resources in Connemara Irish and on the Iron Irish. There's a guy called Seamus Giron who did a whole PhD on the Irish Barn. And unfortunately, there's only a few of us do anything to do with Mayo Irish. Patchy being one, me, and there was somebody else who was doing a podcast for a while too, American lads. It was very funny, actually, very well done. but unfortunately it's we're kind of trying to grab things out of the ashes at the moment really and save as much as we can. And if you see any interviews with Ógie Ó Céalachar, who is a very high achieving lecturer and author and what have you, it's a good example of Ring Irish, which, as I said, be very, very distinctive as compared to the rest of Munster. But yeah, I think I've said enough for one evening at 3:47 after having spent a whole night playing music and about 3 days before Christmas, so, or 2 days. So yeah, Nollag chun a bhí agus Beannachtaí héana agus fiúáise agus le conúide beirimid dó ar an amse díist agus tá dulgan is mó fiú seánna chuir amach an se le conúide maith liom.